Thank you. Well, thank you for having me. I think this is a great opportunity. I've been kind of considering a kind of a meeting like this for quite some time and how I would go about discussing this particular issue. How's the sound on the mic? Is it okay?
Okay.
Okay. And so this gave me the opportunity to kind of cement all of these pieces together. And so this is going to be somewhat of a test balloon. You all are going to kind of help me as we go through this. But what I want to do is spend the first part of this showing you some of our research. So you see the base for what I'm going to be talking about. And so it's going to be a little bit of a lecture, but we're going to go through this research. And then we're going to explore how this research impacts the way we see kids attending and not attending school. And then we'll talk about some of the traditional things that schools do, and it'll give us a framework for understanding why those things haven't worked, and then some suggestions that you guys might consider in your school based on what we learned from this research. So I want to talk a little bit about what we call the elements of effective instruction, or we're starting to call it conditions for learning. These things come from a behavioral model that's been around for quite some time. Has anybody ever heard of the ABC model of behavior?
Yes.
Okay, antecedents, behaviors, consequences. So it's drawn from this idea. But you know, if you run around saying antecedents, people look at you like cross-eyed, so you can't say were the antecedents appropriate for, you can't do that kind of thing. So we had to come up with a language that people would understand. Kids too. We needed to be able to talk to the kids. And so that became clear expectations, and it became skill building, and it became rewards and recognition. So those were those components of the model. So we're talking about expectations, skills, and reward. And then we added a fourth component to this model because we believe there's a setting piece to all of it, and that's relationships. And we're not talking about the relationships that peer-to-peer, but we're talking about teacher-student, adult-student relationships. So those are the four elements that we want to talk about. So this is what this research is about. The data come from our ISQ surveys. You guys have participated in ISQ. We have now surveyed over 2 million people using the ISQ system. We're in our 12th year. Over 1,800 schools have participated. So it's a rather large program, and it gives us a lot of information about all kinds of attributes that schools have. In the larger sense, ISQ looks at the overall climate of the school. It's that whole, it's almost like how much can a school do given the environment they have? Because we've seen some environments that are pretty toxic, and we realize that there's not a whole lot they can do until they get the environment cleaned up, so to speak. Some schools are far enough along in their environment that they could accomplish just about anything. You know, the relationships are in place, the faculty and the administration are together, the parents are on board, they can accomplish just about anything. One of the things that we added to this global piece was kind of this middle piece, and it was what was going on inside the classroom. So it was more than just the overall climate, but it was how pervasive are these elements of instruction in the classrooms. And so we started to design questions that asked about clear expectations, opportunities to build skills, rewards and recognition, and the quality of that relationship between the teacher and the student. And what we found was that we could account for almost 3/4 of the variance of your test scores by just asking those 5 questions. We knew so much about your school based on those things. Now we split the skills piece up into social and academic, but I'm going to show you how that works here in a second. So the purpose of this research was to provide evidence, number one, that kids could provide us really high quality discriminative data. They know good from bad. If you ask them the right questions, they can tell. And the next thing is to provide evidence that, that these elements, if they're in place, are independent in a way of the environment. And that's really, it's really fascinating, but as long as you make expectations clear and you provide opportunities and so on, it doesn't matter if you're at Fast Forward, if you're in downtown Ogden, or if you're on the bench in Mapleton or anywhere else. These elements determine all of it, okay, or at least most of it. So we had, in this first study, we actually just looked at a contrast between 2 districts. The first one was a high socioeconomic status district, okay, homogeneous, white, you know, it was a pretty nice place, 24 elementary schools, Okay, we had 6,500 kids. And just so you know, this particular study was done with elementary school kids, but it was replicated with high school kids. The correlations aren't quite as strong with secondary kids because the kids that are struggling leave the system, and so they aren't part of it. So you restrict the range and the correlations a little bit, but it works exactly the same. This was a fairly homogeneous group of kids, mostly white. They spoke English, very stable, nobody moving around. The contrast was our second district. It was a low SES district with 15 elementary schools, heterogeneous, a lot of English as a second language. We actually had schools in this group where 70% of the kids were English as a second language, and they were very mobile, moving in and out all the time. Okay. A little bit about our surveys. You've seen them. They're short. We include everybody in them, just so you guys know. Does anybody completely unaware of the ISQ surveys? You're all familiar with it for the most part? Okay. So you know what they are. You know our reports. They're designed with colors. I beat Homeland Security. I designed that before they did. Okay. Well, I'll tell you real quickly, the very first ISQ that we did was back in 2000. And we didn't have our reporting system at the time. We were just doing surveys. And so, being a smart young guy, I threw all the data into SPSS. How many of you know SPSS? Okay, it's a statistical package. And I produced a tabular report that was over 100 pages long. And I bundled it up and sent it off to the school. And they called me, the secretary called me on the phone and says, "Oh, thank you so much for this data. Now, can you tell me what a mean and a standard deviation are?" And I went, "Oh, we're in deep trouble here." So understanding that statistics was only something that you got through to get out, and you probably didn't want to maintain that information, we turned things into red, yellow, and green because you all know what a traffic light is. And I added purple just because I felt like it, I think, something like that. So here are our elements that we talked about. What's that? Sure, if you want to control, I'll stand here and the poor camera guy doesn't have to video me bending over the machine. Okay, so here are the elements again. Clear behavioral expectations. Skill building. Now, we split skill building up into social and academic because we know that there are two different sets of skills that are interwoven together because kids' academic success impacts their social interactions, and their social skills actually impact their ability to access academic success, so they're kind of woven together. The rewards and recognition part and positive relationships. Let's go ahead and look at the questions that we use. Now remember, these are 2nd through 6th grade kids, so this is elementary, but the questions are very similar for the older kids. So we asked, are you confused about how to behave at school? This is how we got to expectations. We're actually asking in the reverse because we felt if expectations were clear, they wouldn't be confused at any point. Do you have lots of friends? These are the consequences of having good social skills. Next one. Do you read a lot? Which is the consequences of having academic skills. Does your teacher say you are often doing good work? So for a young child, this is the sense of, does my teacher catch me doing the things that I'm supposed to be doing? And then the positive relationship, does your teacher care about you? Okay. So there are probably lots of ways that these questions could be asked, but these are the ones that we settled on, and they've turned out to be really good questions. Let's go to the next slide. One of the things that we do on the ISQ is we turn things into colors, and the way we did that is something called signal analysis. And so we take a 5-point Likert scale, which goes from strongly disagree to strongly agree about some positive attribute of the school, and we say you're exemplary if you're 80% or more strongly agree. Now that is an industry standard, believe it or not. It's something that's been used in total quality management. I don't know if you guys have read management literature. That's what he's all about. He's my MBA colleague. He does all the management stuff. But that's an industry standard. In fact, my oldest brother, who is vice president of Safeco Insurance, could tell you their percent strongly agree on every given day. So they monitor that number very closely because they're calling up their customers saying, you know, did you get the service you need? So they monitor that very closely. You could find out how the IRS is doing, how Ford is doing, because they know this. Let's go to the next one. Green is 80% either agree or strongly agree. Yellow is everything that isn't red, green, or purple. Love that. And then the last one is red, 20% or more either disagree or strongly disagree. They go out of their way to say, no, the school isn't doing that. Okay, so that's where the colors come from. With younger kids, we actually had to reduce the scale down because With younger kids, we don't give them a 5-point scale. We give them a frowny face, a neutral face, and a smiley face. So they get just disagree to agree. And here it is. It's very, very similar, but it allows us to convert that data into colors. Let's go to the next slide. The ISQ looks at 7 different components of the school environment, and the first one is the parent support. And here's the items that we use for parent support: help at school, they know what happens. The next one is the teacher excellence component. Teachers caring, teachers enjoy what they're doing. The kids' commitment to their education: I behave well, I like to learn. The administration. The next one is the overall instruction at the school, the resources at the school, and the last one is safety. So here are the 14 items that we asked the kids. And then we did something really interesting. We said, of those 5 questions on the elements of effective instruction, how many of those elements, and I combined the 2 skills ones, but how many of the 4 elements were available to you? How much of that did you perceive was working for you as a kid? And 51% of the kids say, my world's great, I got it all. Expectations are clear, I have lots of chance to build my skills, I get rewarded for what I do, and I got relationships. Those kids, that's what they think of school. So what's happening in the classroom in terms of their instruction, that's now what they think of school. Let's go to the next group. So for those kids that were missing one item, if you think about this for a second, if you remove one of those elements, the behaviors can go away. So if you don't know what it is you're supposed to do, you don't have the skills or tools to do it, or you don't find it rewarding in any way, there's a chance you might not do it. So we know that if you pull one leg out from this stool, you're actually are removing the chance that the kids will do what they're supposed to do. And these kids, all right, they still like school. School's not a bad place, not quite as purple as the others. You guys are familiar, obviously, with Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. What percentage of our kids are in Tier 1? Yeah, about 81% of the kids. So our Tier 1 kids are saying that almost all, or maybe one, is missing. This is how we define Tier 1, basically. Those are those kids. If you pull away a second one of those elements, now you've got about 13% of the kids, and now all of a sudden they don't like to learn. So you see immediately this drops to red right here. So as expectations become unclear, the relationships aren't there, they don't have the skills, all of a sudden it's no fun. Let's go to the next one. Now, with most of it gone, this is not a safe place anymore. I don't feel comfortable here. And if all of them are gone, you can see what happens. When kids don't perceive those elements there, none of the school works for them. They're not connected to any part of it, they don't like any part of it. Look at this. What percentage are Tier 2? About 15%. What percentage are Tier 3? About 5%. So you can see that these play out pretty much how we perceive the tiers in instruction. Now, this is the high SES district, and you've got over half their kids locked into this all 4 spot. That's pretty good. That's a pretty healthy percentage. Let's go to the next slide. Go back again. Now go forward. Okay. What I did was I just switched between the high SES district and the low SES district. So this is the poor kid.